High energy costs are forcing manufacturers to shut down in the West, and it's causing conflict between the US and Europe. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with your data. Incogni helps you stop them. I'll explain more at the end. So, high energy costs have a crippling effect on the economy. It's affecting everything, whether it's transportation, food, or keeping my lights on all night to keep the monsters away. The second it's dark, that's when they can get you. High power costs especially hurt industrial manufacturers. These are industries that constantly need large amounts of energy to keep machines running. Shutting down any manufacturing plant is usually a last resort, especially for glass and aluminum makers. Not only does it take a lot of time and effort to make sure molten metal doesn't destroy entire facilities by solidifying, but it can also take anywhere between 6 to 9 months just to restart operations. Wait, these factories can be destroyed if they stop? I can't imagine how stressful it is working in an industry whose entire method of operation is the premise to the movie Speed. As much as manufacturers hope to keep their plants running, some are being forced to cut their losses. For example, back in June, the second largest U.S. producer of aluminum, Century Aluminum, announced that it would temporarily idle its smelter in Kentucky. They laid off over 600 employees. Not too long after that, the nation's largest producer of aluminum, Alcoa, also announced a halt, closing a third of its production at a mill in Indiana. But high energy prices could also be helping U.S. manufacturing, because as bad as things are in America, they're much worse in Europe. We should just put that on a t-shirt. Energy prices are far higher in Europe right now, where factories across the continent might be forced to relocate or close down. European industry thrived for decades on a steady supply of cheap Russian gas. But now that Russia has invaded Ukraine, Europe is in a world of hurt. Which isn't really new to them, since 90% of world history starts with, and then Europe was in a world of hurt. But now, almost every industry in Europe is being hit. Aluminum producers, steel makers, zinc producers, glass makers, ammonia producers, which are vital for fertilizers, even toilet paper makers. Which isn't as scary as when that happens in America, since Europe has embraced bidets. The US needs to get on this bandwagon. The whole reason European monarchies don't have the power they used to is because this throne makes everyone feel like royalty. The point is, European manufacturers are reducing production, laying off employees, going bankrupt, or a combination of all of the above. According to a European Industrial Association, half of the EU's aluminum and zinc capacity is offline due to the power crisis. Producers face electricity and gas costs over 10 times higher than last year, far exceeding the sales price for their products. And worst of all, if the lights go out, they're in danger of being overrun by monsters. All this is chipping away at Europe's industrial might. Many fear that Europe is facing an uncontrolled deindustrialization, meaning more and more factories would have to shut down because of energy costs, which could eventually force Europe into a recession. So, what are European manufacturers doing to survive? Simple. They're moving out. And Europe doesn't like that. More after the break. Welcome back. Crippling energy bills force Europe's factories to go dark. Great. The sequel no one wanted, Dark Ages 2. No electricity boogaloo. Many fear that this will erode Europe's competitiveness. European governments are trying to pump billions of dollars in energy aid to try and fix this. Germany, for example, is spending almost $200 billion to help households and small to medium-sized companies cope with surging prices. Which is surprising, mostly because I thought Germany was powered by rage. But many companies already have their eyes set for relocating to cheaper locations overseas. Well, they've been doing that for years, but now even more so. Several big manufacturers are looking to move to India for things like electric cars, electronics, and even steel. And of course, there are still European companies who are looking to move more manufacturing to China, because some people never learn. Moving to India and China is the corporate version of moving back in with your parents, where instead of making you sandwiches, they charge you fewer taxes. But there's another country that's attracting a lot of European manufacturers: the US. An October survey by the German Chambers of Commerce and Industry showed 39% of companies wanted to increase investment in the US, compared with 32% for Europe. Wow. So Europeans want to come to the US for something other than making people at beaches feel uncomfortable with their swimsuits. Many European manufacturers are already planning on building new facilities in the US, which for the UK must be awkward because that's more like a parent moving in with their child. Part of it is because energy is much more abundant and cheaper in the US than in Europe. It's also because of incentives provided by President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed into law earlier this year and will take effect in January. It's a $430 billion bill that includes state aid to boost U.S. manufacturing and incentives for consumers to buy American products, including cars, batteries, and renewable energies. This is especially attractive for companies that create chemicals, batteries, and other energy-intensive products. The incentives, combined with cheaper energy prices in the U.S., have raised fears of an exodus of European manufacturers to America. As you can imagine, European governments don't like this at all. Germany's economy minister described the Inflation Reduction Act as excessive and hoovering up investments from Europe. Is it just me, or does he sound like a jealous girlfriend? The EU is even threatening potential retaliation, arguing that the Inflation Reduction Act risks unfair discrimination and goes against World Trade Organization rules. According to Financial Times, the Biden administration's trade officials said the EU should just introduce more subsidies themselves. Which sounds like maybe he wouldn't be so interested in me if you got yourself in shape. Is this an economic debate or a cat fight? A joint EU-US task force is trying to resolve the issue, with Europeans demanding preferential treatment like Canada and Mexico. In the meantime, some countries like France want the EU to take things into its own hands by adopting a Buy European Act. There's a lot of anger against the US, with many accusing it of profiting from the war in Ukraine thanks to sky-high gas prices. I'm sure that Americans really feel like they're profiting every time they fill up the tank. But a lot of the blame for Europe's energy problems go back to their own energy policies. For the better part of 3 decades, America has watched European allies commit to throttling their own conventional energy production and lavishly subsidizing renewable energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, all at consumers' expense. As a result, Europe has one of the most expensive energy sectors in the world. And it's also dependent on Russian gas, which is not working out so great. If Europe wants to get competitive, then it's going to need to get both its energy and manufacturing policies straight. Otherwise, there will be yet another chapter of world history starting with, and then Europe was in a world of hurt. And this episode has been sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. Your name, your email, your home address, your social security number, your employment history, all sorts of things. What are they doing with your data? They're buying it, selling it, and trading it like you're a commodity. If all they do is use it to sell you products, you're lucky. Some of them use it to adjust your credit score, or potentially more nefarious things. And if any of those companies get hacked, you could be in big trouble. For example, earlier this year, a hacker stole user data from 5.4 million Twitter accounts, which included users' phone numbers and email addresses. And that hacker put this user data up for sale on the web for 30 grand. And if Twitter can be hacked, so can all the smaller companies that buy and sell your data. This is why I signed up for Incogni. It showed me that more than 100 data brokers had collected my private information. Incogni forces these companies to delete your data. There are laws that allow you to do this, but if you want to do it yourself, you'd have to figure out the applicable laws, write letters in a specific legal way, and follow up to make sure your instructions are followed. Incogni handles this for you. So far, Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 72 of these data brokers, and they've got a lot more still in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. So check out Incogni using the link below or go to incogni.com/uncovered. The first 100 people to use the code UNCOVERED will get 20% off. Get personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.